night was quiet, but I was vaguely aware that something was going on. "Did you hear something, sir?" I asked Mr. Nevinson. "Pretty certain I did." He sounded puzzled. "Did you?" "Well, I thought I heard a sort of footstep or something. It seemed to be in your room." Jessie stirred and sat forward, her voices evidently having roused her. "What's the matter, Milton?" Nothing," I said hastily, not wanting to alarm her. "I was just asking your father something. You seem to have been in a doze." Mr. Nevinson had got out of the hammock, and I could see that it was his intention to go into his room to investigate. Jessie was just asking him if he was going to bed when we heard a thump and a half-stifled shriek from the direction of the dining room. It was Mrs. Nevinson. We heard her cry, "Oh, my God! Oh, my God! Ralph! Milton! Come quickly!" This was a significant development in my Bones and My Flute. Thinking back on it, I realized that this impression is among the most striking of those that still remain in my memory. Even without referring to my diary, I would have recalled that picture of Mrs. Nevinson at the moment when we rushed into the dining room. Her face was chalky white, but through some freak of circulation, the blood still hovered in a pink patch around her throat. We found her standing by the sideboard. There was a box of matches in her hand, and she was staring with a scared fixity at something on the floor. I followed her gaze and saw Mynheer Woeman's manuscript. The memory of that moment comes back with uncanny clarity. I even recall that I clutched my thigh hard, and that a tiny white midge floated past irresolutely between Mr. Nevinson and myself, moving toward the light that dangled over the dining table. Jessie was the first to speak. She asked her mother why she had screamed, and Mrs. Nevinson pointed at the manuscript and replied in an agitated murmur, "It must have been that. I don't know. Something frightened me." I could barely make out what she said. She glanced slowly round the room. "Were you in my room a moment ago, Nell?" her husband asked. "Yes, I went in there. I didn't want you to know. I tried not to make any noise." She spoke like a schoolgirl caught in a shameful act. I had never before seen her so thoroughly cowed and scared. "I found the manuscript in the dictionary on the dressing table." She appeared to be hardly aware of what she was saying. Some insect was making a soft ticking sound just outside one of the windows, and the scent of the river came in warm and dank. There was wonder as well as curiosity mingled with the annoyance in Mr. Nevinson's face. He stared at her with a heavy frown, as though he too found it difficult to articulate. Jessie said, "But, Mother, what made you do it? You knew you shouldn't have done it. We've told you about the manuscript. You should never have touched it." I picked up the manuscript and examined it. Then I looked at Mrs. Nevinson and said, "What were you trying to do with it, Mrs. N? Burn it?" "Yes. I struck a match and held it to it. I wanted to see if burning it wouldn't have gotten rid of all your mysterious flute sounds." "But how did you know it was in the dictionary?" I asked. "I heard you mention to Ralph this afternoon that you'd put it in there after you'd finished writing up your diary." "But what happened?" her husband asked impatiently. "You haven't yet told us why you screamed. What frightened you? Why don't you explain?" She hesitated, and again glanced round the room, then murmured, "I don't know. I can't understand it, Ralph. It doesn't seem... It's quite absurd. And yet it did happen. I know it did. I saw it plainly." "So what? What happened, Nell? What happened?" "As soon as I struck the match and held it to the manuscript, I saw a kind of hand." "A what?" I know it seems ridiculous, but it's true. I saw it, Ralph, a sort of hand. It appeared from behind me as if some creature had been standing behind me, waiting, watching me." We simply stood there, looking at her, waiting for her to go on. "It knocked the parchment out of my hand, and the lighted match, and I heard a shriek, a whistling kind of shriek, but it sounded like, well, not like a voice, but some instrument, a police whistle, or perhaps a flute. Yes, it was more like a flute. Right in my ear it sounded, an angry sound. It was horrible. I've never had anything so horrible happen to me before." "But what do you mean by a hand?" Mr. Nevinson asked her. "I don't understand this. Look here, you're trembling." His voice was almost distracted. "What possessed you in the first place to go looking for that manuscript in my room?" Jessie cut in with a hysterical exasperation. "Oh, don't nag at her like that, Daddy. Hasn't she told you? She wanted to burn the thing. That's why she went in and got it." "I don't want you to tell me how to behave, Jessie," her father snapped. "Sir, I think Jessie's right this time," I intervened. "We're all getting too excited. Let's calm down a bit and let Mrs. N tell us exactly what happened." I turned to Mrs. Nevinson and asked, "Can you describe this hand you saw, Mrs. Nevy?" She gave me a grateful look and said, "I don't know how to begin, really, Milton. Because—" She broke off, hesitated, then went on. "It was nothing human. I've never seen anything like it in my life. It was greyish and sort of covered with fur. Oh, it's no use. I can't describe it. But it wasn't human, I know. It looked devilish. And that whistling note that went through my head, it was almost like a cry of rage." Jessie was gripping my elbow, and I could sense the rigidity of her body as she stared at her mother. Mr. Nevinson had paced off towards the window and stood frowning out at the fireflies in the gloom. Battling to keep calm, I said, "Go carefully, Mrs. N. Remember you said at first you heard an angry sound. Now you say it was like a cry of rage. Which would you say it was exactly? A cry, or a whistling, or an angry exclamation?" "What does it matter? I'm not in the witness box. You and Ralph always treat people as though you think yourselves barristers in a courtroom or something. It was a horrible sound. That's all I can tell you for certainty. And it was shrill, as if some instrument like a flute or a whistle had produced it. I can't tell you any more than that." "I see your point," I said patiently, and though I didn't feel so at the time, I can well appreciate now that I must indeed have sounded like a barrister. I continued, "But I have a good reason for asking, Mrs. Nevy. It may be important. What I mean is this. So far, none of us has heard anything like what you describe. It's always been this leisurely, aimless tune played on a flute. Why should you have heard a shrill whistling, an angry sound? For all we know, you may have succeeded in scaring off Mynheer Voerman. If it was really a cry of rage you heard, it might have been the old chap's last despairing expression of fear and surrender. No, I'm not trying to be funny. I'm sure such things have happened in occult manifestations before. Perhaps by applying that match to the manuscript, you may have broken the spell, and this could well be the end of the whole affair. What I want to know is whether you think it was a defiant whistling sound that you heard, or a sort of despairing wail." She shook her head, bewildered. "I really can't be certain, boy. If anything, I should say it sounded defiant and angry. I just know it was horrible. I never dreamt that anything like this could happen in actuality. And that hand! But it's incredible. I can hardly believe I'm not asleep and dreaming this." She began to glance around the room nervously again. The baboons were growling ominously upriver, and Jessie's grip on my elbow tightened. I glanced at Mr. Nevinson and said, "Sir, would you have any objections to my trying out the experiment Mrs. Nevy attempted, just to see what happens?" Mr. Nevinson, who had seated himself at the dining table, turned sharply. "No, Milton. Nothing of the sort. We are trying no more experiments in this house. By the way, let me have that manuscript, if you please." As I crossed the room and gave the manuscript to him, I noticed the harrowed light in his eyes, and I felt rather sorry for him. Jessie, on the other hand, was not so sympathetic. She said,
Daddy, I don't see why you should speak like that. I think Milton is right. It may help us if we try burning the manuscript. It might break the spell. Why can't we try it?
Her father merely made a nervous gesture of dismissal with the stem of his pipe, and Mrs. Nevinson said, Your father is right, Jessie. It mightn't be safe to try. There's something really uncanny about the thing. She spoke in a subdued tone, and her voice contained the humility that, for her, was most unusual. It was seeing a facet of her character with which I was entirely unfamiliar. None of us, in fact, remained the same as the march of events continued. In my bones and my flute.